My name is Gavin Evans, and this is my review of Stranger Things Season 4, and this will be a spoiler-filled review, so if you haven't seen it, go and watch it, then come back and watch this review because I will be going in depth. Now, it's frustrating. Just straight out, it's a very frustrating season because the first 8 episodes are absolutely phenomenal. Like some of the best television ever made. Period. And the last episode I just found to be so underwhelming that it kind of retroactively brings the rest of the season down just a little bit. And I wanted to love this season so much. Like, this was on track to be one of my favorite seasons of television ever. And the last episode just gets in the way, and it's just so frustrating. But I did hear amazing things about this season. I was still a bit skeptical though because of how long these episodes were. Like, I say that almost every single TV show has way too long of episodes these days. So the fact that these episodes were like an hour and 20 minutes long, with some being an hour and a half, some being an hour and 40 minutes, and the season finale being 2 hours and 20 minutes, I was just like, okay, that is way too much. That should not be allowed. But I actually think those lengths are warranted. The first 2 episodes, you do feel the lengths a bit more just because they're setting up so much story and so many characters. But once episode 3 came around, I was in it and I was never out from that point forward. I do think the size of the cast and just how much story we get in one season is on a level here that we've never witnessed. Like, there is 23 main cast members that I counted, and it works. And I'm really glad that we got the first 2 episodes to set them all up. And I think this is a very ambitious and a very epic season of television. And for 99.99999% of the time, you can see the massive budget on the screen. There was just so much in this one season, and I adore so much of it. I love how the story is kind of part Nightmare on Elm Street, part Insidious 2, part The Great Escape. You've got yourself a globe-trotting adventure, a monster gladiator ring, a top secret lab, and it all works. I just loved so many elements in the way they came together. But the best storyline is without a doubt just everything regarding Vecna. It's just everything I've wanted this show to be from the start. It fully embraces the horror and sci-fi angle, and I just love how it constantly evolves. Like, it starts off as a mystery. Who is this guy? What's going on? Where is he? And the way that these answers got answered, I did find satisfying. Like, the backstory of who Wagner is shouldn't work for me on paper, but I actually think they tied it back to the first season in an impressive way that I do find cohesive. It didn't feel like something that's way too much of a stretch that doesn't make any bit of sense. It really does work for me the more I think about it. And I love how his plan is to create enough portals for the 2 worlds to clash together. You really do feel the stakes here. And I love how there's a mystery element here that kind of feels like Scooby-Doo in moments that I really dug. And I love how Max draws everything she sees in the upside down in that one moment, and Nancy puts all the pictures together to form the house. And you can argue that's a bit of a stretch, but I really like stuff like that. And I also love how when they go to the house to investigate, we see the clock and you're just slowly putting together the pieces, and then they're trying to find Wagner, and they find out that wherever he walks, the lights get brighter, so they use that to follow him upstairs. And then once they find him, the camera flips upside down and you see Wagner claiming his next victim. I actually thought that was some of the most exciting stuff in this entire show, period. And I also love how they have to find a gate, and the fact that this gate is at the bottom of a lake is just a very small thing that actually makes it feel very different than every other gate we've seen in the show. And then I love how they have to jump through the gate to escape the cops, and they get stuck in the upside down and they have to find their way back. So then they find Dustin, Lucas, and Erica and communicate with them to try to find a way out of this situation. And I just loved all this stuff. Like I said, it kind of reminds me of Insidious Chapter 2, but instead of the Spirit Land, it's the Upside Down. And I just found it to be absolutely exceptional. When they have the light bright out and they're using that to communicate, I just had the biggest smile on my face. I'm like, this is so unique and ambitious, and I absolutely love it. And then I also love how when they find the portal, the upside down is actually upside down and the real physics on display there. And I also love the fact that the jocks are after them and they get the town to turn on them as well. And so now everybody's looking for them, and it just adds an extra layer of tension. I do wish we got more payoff for that in the finale, but the build up was definitely effective. And I like how it plays on the satanic panic of the 80s. And then we've got Harper's storyline that, if I'm being honest, I was expecting this to be the weak link of this season. I was expecting this to be the storyline that every time we go back to it, for me to be like, oh, can we get this over with? But I was surprised at just how good and how entertaining this one was. I love how we just get this whole prison break aspect to it. Like in a world filled with monsters and alternate dimensions, just a prison break is so refreshing to have here. And the way it constantly evolves of him coming up with a plan to escape, and how that plan completely falls apart, and how things get worse and he's locked in with the guard that he was working with, and how they build up to this gladiator fight with one of the Demogoblin things. I just loved all that. And then they get rescued and they find a way to bring them back. I thought that was really well done. And then you've got this underground base with all these experiments taking place, and I love that. And I also love how on Joyce's side of this storyline, you've got what feels like a globe-trotting adventure. Like every time it cuts to the plane, it just feels much bigger than the show has ever felt before. And the way it does build to Joyce eventually saving him is really well done, and their reunion is a really sweet moment. So I thought this storyline was surprisingly great. Like, I loved it. Not just, oh, okay, it's fine. No, it's great. And then we've got Eleven, who is more isolated as her storyline finds a way to explore her past and her backstory, but it does tie into everything going on very directly, so it doesn't ever feel like filler. And the way this story builds and ties to the main plot is very well handled. It adds to the lore of this universe, it adds a bit more depth to her story, and we see her become powerful again. I thought episode 8 was very tense when Brenner wouldn't let her leave again, and I thought that stuff was very effective. And when Brenner was dying and he's begging Eleven to tell him that she understands why he did the things that he did, and I was really worried there for a second that she would, but then she just says goodbye and she doesn't give him that satisfaction. I thought that was a really great moment. And then we've got the storyline of Mike, Will, and Jonathan, and it's fine. It's entertaining enough, but it's definitely the weakest of the bunch. It's just not a lot goes on here. It's just kind of a standard world trip, and I like how they're trying to find clues to where Eleven is, and they find ways to keep it entertaining. Like, instead of just finding out the coordinates ASAP, they have to go see Susie, and you've got this entertaining sequence with her family, which I really enjoyed. But it's definitely the worst of the storylines. But I do love that one shootout scene. Like, it's very well shot. You feel the tension. And the fact that those two lazy agents are actually proven to be capable was quite the welcome surprise. So, yeah. And then, well, we've got to talk about Dear Billy, because this is the best episode of the show so far. And it's one of the best episodes of television, period. I thought this episode was absolutely phenomenal. I love how it explores the character of Max and how she's lost so much and she's in so much pain, and how she has to deal with the fact that she might actually die. It just makes you think, if you knew you had 24 hours left to live, how would you act? And I thought the idea of her writing letters to everyone was very well handled. And you've also got the added plot of Nancy and Robin trying to find a way to save her. And then we get introduced to Victor Creel, and I thought everything regarding his backstory was really well written. I thought it was great. But anyways, things keep getting worse and worse, and you think that Max might actually die here. So it all builds to this finale where the stakes are high, the tension is present, and we get what is the greatest moment of this entire show. Just the running up the hill sequence is phenomenal. It's perfection. It is just so freaking good. Like, Max is tied to this thing with vines, and she has no way out. They discover that music could help her out. The music kicks in, which adds some extra bit of emotion and atmosphere, and she's on the verge of death, and then she remembers all these memories that she had with her friends. And stuff like this can be very cheesy, and it can not work, but they made it work, and I found it to be so emotionally overwhelming. And as she finds the strength to injure him for just a few seconds, long enough for her to run away, and he keeps throwing every obstacle in her path, and she keeps running and running, and the music is playing. It's absolutely breathtaking, it's tense, it's thrilling, and then it cuts to black. She wakes up, she falls down, and everyone's surrounding her, giving her a hug, and she's like in disbelief, like, I'm still here. I'm still here. And Lucas says, I thought we lost you. And you just gain this sense that this group of friends have really come to love each other. And as the piano version of Running Up the Hill starts playing into the credits, it just allows everything to linger, and you just feel every emotion you're supposed to, and it's just so great. And I just love how this entire moment is that Max is depressed, and Vecna represents like depression and suicidal tendencies, and how Max has to remember the good in her life to find that strength to keep going. And I think the metaphor is strong, the tension is there, the stakes are there, the emotion is there, the music is great, the way the entire episode builds to this one moment, it is a perfect scene. And that entire episode just is really phenomenal. And I actually do want to touch on the themes of this season, because I feel like it's trying to do more here. Like, I love how it's trying to explore grief and depression and suicidal tendencies, like I just said. But you've also got this element of, well, Eleven thinks that she's a monster. She gets bullied and she beats up this girl. And in that moment, she is a monster. And you see how she wants to be better. And then she's faced with someone very similar to her who took the evil path. And I do wish they played up those ideas a bit more, of Eleven facing what she has the potential to be face to face. But the ideas are definitely there, and it's effective. But how also, if you go too far in the other direction, where you have no control and you can't do anything, it isn't good either. It's about creating those fine lines between good and evil, and controlled and uncontrollable. And I also love how this season explores the idea of your inevitable death, any bit of regrets you might have in life, and how you hang on to people you love and memories that make life worth living. And I also love how it explores those terrible thoughts you may have in moments where you think things that you don't want to think. Like, everything regarding Max's memories of Billy is so powerful. It's not just the fact that Billy died, it's the fact that in Billy's last moments, she saw potential in him that she never saw before, and realized that they maybe could have had a relationship if he made it out alive. And it's about that wasted potential that's eating her up. And there's also the whole element of how Max is somewhat relieved that he died too, but then she hates the fact that she thinks that. And there's just so much complexity there. And mind you, that it's exploring so much of the human condition while telling a story with monsters in alternate dimensions and Russian prisons, and they're able to tackle all these ideas. It's really impressive, and this is a very well-directed season of television. Like I said, 99.999999999% of the time, you do see the budget on the screen, and it feels huge. And I also love the fact that they're able to balance out all the characters and stories incredibly well. And I love how it balances all these different tones incredibly well. It fully embraces the horror genre, which I really loved. Like, you get those moments where you see the eyes sewn shut and you've got the balloons popping and there's blood everywhere. That reminded me of it. And I love the look of Vecna. Like, the makeup and the costume design that went into that is absolutely phenomenal. And I love how he connects to all those things and it lifts him up. That's great. I love the look of his lair and how it's surrounded by these bats. I thought that was a great addition. And I just think the Upside Down is so atmospheric. I love the music. It kind of reminds me of Nightmare on Elm Street. And the inclusion of the ticking clock throughout really does add a lot of tension. I love the continued style of the 80s. I thought the soundtrack was great. And I love how this season actually has songs that stand out. Like, the soundtrack has always been a key part of this show's identity. But if you look back on season 1, there's not very many songs that stand out. Same with season 2, same with season 3. But here we've got Running Up the Hill, which I already mentioned is used incredibly well. And it's such a great song. I'm so glad that it's getting the recognition it's always deserved. And then you've also got the use of Separate Ways, Worlds Apart. Which, by the way, is the perfect title for that moment. Separate ways, the characters are going their separate ways and they're going to be worlds apart. Very great, but the use of that, it feels epic, it feels grand. And the way that they all get out of the trailer with every you, edited so perfectly. And like at the end of episode 8, how can you not be pumped? Like, it just builds to this finale so incredibly well. So I love the usage of those two songs, and I also think this is a very funny season. Like, there's this one moment where Ted Wheeler tells the cops to arrest the kids, and maybe that's how they'll learn, and I thought that was hilarious. You also got this one joke between Robin and Steve where they keep calling Vecna Henry/1/Vecna. I thought that was hilarious. So there's lots of great jokes that don't ruin the atmosphere and the tension. But if I am going to talk about negatives here, like I said, you see the budget 99.99999% of the time, and there is some bad CGI. Two things in particular. Whenever somebody's lifted in the air and the bones start to snap and then the face starts to get disjointed, it doesn't look real. It looks incredibly CGI heavy. And then when we see one go to the Upside Down and all the lightning is hitting his face, the CGI is really bad in that moment too. It kind of reminds me of Batman Forever, where Jim Carrey's testing out his experiment, and I don't know, it doesn't work for me, but the visual effects the rest of the time look really good. But let's also talk about the cast. First with Finn Wolfhard, who plays Mike, and he does act how a 15-year-old would. But I did find him to be a little annoying here. I don't like his speech to Eleven at the end, and I honestly hate the fact that the two always fight. It just makes the relationship seem so bad. Like, why can't they just get along for an entire season? And I don't know, I don't feel like he had a lot to do. He's not bad, but he's fine. And then you've got Noah Schnapp as well, who unfortunately got the worst barber on the planet because that haircut is absolutely atrocious. I just don't feel like this character's ever been interesting. He's good in season 1 when he's missing because we don't have to deal with him, and in season 2 when he's sick. But I didn't like him last season, and I don't like him here. And ever since season 1, it's been clear that Will is gay, but so much of this season leans into that way too much, while he keeps saying things to Mike that he wants to say. and Mike isn't getting the hint. And then he keeps staring at Mike, talking to Eleven, and he feels sad about. It just feels like that was his one big character trait this season, that he was gay and he had very little else to do. Then you've got Charlie Heaton as Jonathan, who continues to be better than who he was at the start of the show. They turned him into a stoner heel, and I think that's perfectly fine. I think he's fine enough. Still not a great character, but I don't hate him anymore. Then you've got Eduardo Franco as Argyle, who I thought was a really funny new addition. He's not in it too much to the point where he gets annoying. He's in it just enough, and he did crack me up. Like that one scene in the finale where he's talking to the other sofa dude absolutely cracked me up. And then you've got Millie Bobby Brown, who is once again fantastic as Eleven. This is one of her best performances, and I think she handled all the emotion this season incredibly well. And where she is at the start and where she is at the end, I do find her arc was very powerful. Like, she's learning to accept mistakes and to try and be a better person, and I really like that. Then we've got Matthew Modine, who somehow survived. I don't know how, but I do like how this character was handled. I hated him so very much. He's such an evil, manipulative psychopath who always thinks he's right, and I'm glad he got what was coming to him. You also got Paul Weiser as Owens, who is good. Yeah, that's all I really have to say on him. And then we've got David Harbour as Harper, who I thought was really bad last season, but he's much better here. He plays him in a much more grounded manner here, and this might be his best work. You also got Winona Ryder, who's back to play Joyce. Once again, much better here. She plays her much more grounded and is really great, and it allowed me to get much more invested in their relationship. It's kind of crazy what you can do when your characters aren't so over the top. Then you've also got, who I'm going to say is the most underappreciated actor of this entire season, and it's Nicola Duwuku, who plays Yui. And nobody's talking about this guy. And somebody tell me why. This guy was such a fantastic new character. He's a hilarious new addition. He's such an evil scumbag that you want to punch in the face, but you can't stay mad at him too long because he's so funny. So I really loved him. You also got Tom Willausha, who plays Enzo. And I also thought this was a great new character that nobody's talking about, who had lots of depth in how he's trying to do the right thing in a place where that is punishable. You also got Brett Gelman as Maury, who I've really come to like a lot by this point. I just think he has a very unique and entertaining presence. And I like how his karate was at first treated like a joke, but it actually came in handy, so I like that. And then you've got Caleb McLaughlin as Lucas, and this might be his best performance. Like, he's really, really great here. And I love how he's trying to be a jock at the start of this season, but then he decides to help his friends after all, and how he just continues to be a good person and charming and likable from that point forward. I love that. You've got Gaten Mozzarella. I know I mispronounced that name though. I do it intentionally at this point because I cannot pronounce that last name as it should be spoken. But I do think this is his best performance as Dustin. He has more to do and he totally owns it. He's charming. I like his relationship with both Steve and Eddie, and those emotional bits in the end of this season where he's talking to Eddie's uncle, he nailed it. And then you've got Sadie Sink as Max, who is just incredible here. The fact that she didn't get nominated for an Emmy is an absolute joke. She is the standout. The standout in a season filled with great performances. I already talked about the brilliance of Dear Billy, but she just plays it so perfectly, and she's great throughout. She's charming, she's funny, she's likable, but she has so much pain inside of her, and there's so much emotion that she's able to portray so perfectly. I was really blown away by her here. And then you've got Joe Keery as Steve, and this is another performance that I feel like should have been nominated. It's not the kind of in-your-face performance that's just like, look how good at acting I am, but it's very natural. He's so naturally charming and likable and funny, and he's just got a great personality that elevates every single scene and makes this show so watchable. And I liked his conversations with Nancy. I liked how that romance came back for a little bit in this season. But where he's talking to Nancy about how he's thankful that she thumped his head, but how he wishes somebody thumped his head before she did, so then his head would have already been thumped when he was with her. I don't know, a part of me, there's just something so human about that, and I really connected to that whole spiel. Then you've got Natalie Dyer's Nancy, who once again gives her best performance yet. I love her friendship with Robin and just how different they are. I love her relationship with Steve. And she just has a lot more personality, she has more to do, and she's a complete badass when needed. It's really her best work. Then you've got Maya Hawke, who plays Robin, who just plays the klutzy person so incredibly well. I think she's hilarious, charming, and great, and I'm so glad that she's a regular of the show now. You also got Prara Ferguson as Erica, who I complained about in season 3, but she was much better here. She's better in small doses, and she's great when she's in this season. Then you've also got Robert Englund as Victor Creel. He's not in it a lot, only one scene, but he's great in that one scene. And I like how they casted him because they knew the Nightmare on Elm Street references that they were doing. You've also got Mason Dye as Jason, who, this is a bad guy, a bit too over the top, but you do understand where he's coming from. And he does play the jock so incredibly well. You've got Joseph Quinn as Eddie, who is once again fantastic. This is one of the best performances of this season. He just has so much personality. He's so funny and great. And that scene where he's playing guitar, I think it's a Metallica song, and to get the attention of the bats is a metal moment. And I love it. And then you've also got Jamie Campbell Bower, who plays Vecna, and this guy just plays evil personified so incredibly well, and the way that he represents depression and grief and just the walls of someone's personality, he does it so well. He's creepy, he's menacing, he's a real threat, and he really adds that to this character. So, this is the best acted season of the bunch. Everybody is on their A game here. Nobody disappoints. Nobody. And that's really impressive for a cast of this size. But it's time to address the last episode. It is the biggest disappointment I think I've ever experienced with a piece of media. Like I said, at the end of episode 8, with Separate Ways playing and them walking up to the house, and I was just like, oh my god, I cannot wait. And the last episode just kept disappointing me time and time again. I was legitimately debating giving this season a 9.5, which is a rating I never give. But I was so in love with it. It just was unique, it was ambitious, it was epic, it was emotional, it was thrilling, it was tense, it had great characters, well acted, well directed, just everything. And then this episode comes along and it bums me out. It really does. I take no joy in ripping this last episode apart because it really does hold back this season. But let's talk about some of my issues. First, with the fact that at 2 hours and 20 minutes long, this episode is indeed too long. It feels very bloated, and I think you could have easily trimmed out a good half hour to 40 minutes and it would have been all the better for it, because at a eventual point, it does start to feel like it's dragging. And another thing I didn't like about this season is Eddie's death. I just found it to be very underwhelming. He draws the bats away, and he has this character arc of where he stops running away and he faces his fears. But why? Why in this moment? If they found a way to trap the bats someplace, and he's about to leave the Upside Down, and then he decides to go with Nancy and Steve and help them out at the house, and he dies there, that would have been much better. But he's on his bike, he falls off, and he's running, and then he's just like, you know what? No, I'm going to die like a man. Look at my growth. But it's just so unsatisfying. And Max should have died. Like, the fact that they brought her back is lazy. It's getting done time and time again. They brought back Matthew Modine. They brought back Harpo. They brought back, I don't know, I'm sure they brought someone else back. 11. They brought 11 back. And now it's just to the point where they're overdoing it, and you kind of eliminate the stakes by bringing everyone back from the dead. And I think it would have been very emotional because she already wrote letters to everyone, so maybe she could have read, like they could have read them at the end of this season. And on top of that, I also think Steve should have died. I felt like they were building up to it incredibly well. The way that he was talking about his dream and the fact that he wants to be a protector for all these people. Like, a sacrifice for Steve is totally in character, and because we like him all so much, it would have been the best decision they could have made. And then just nothing. And I'm sorry, but you do need some of the main characters to die at an eventual point. First of all, this cast is getting way too big. You've got to kill some people off to keep it from being even bigger. And on top of that, it just creates stakes. If you feel like the characters can never die, it means that they have plot armor, and it takes you out of it time and time again. Now, in the next season, if someone dies, I'm going to be like, well, wait, they're going to be brought back to life in 3, 2, 1, and then it'll happen. I know the showrunners were like, well, we're not Game of Thrones, so we're not going to kill our cast. And that is the wrong approach. Completely, 100%. If you want to have tension, you want to have stakes, then you need to be willing to go to those places. And the fact that the main characters never die, or if they do, they come back to life, and the new characters every season always seem to be the ones to die, it's become lazy. It really has. And despite everything that happened in this season, in the last half hour, it kind of felt like we were back at square one. Like, sure, there was this giant portal in the middle of the city, but it's just lacking a certain bit of weight to the conclusion. A better ending would have been if Max died and then the portals open up and the two worlds clash together. Vecna just threw Steve, Nancy, and Robin out like they were nothing, and the season ends there. Could you imagine? Like, that would have been a phenomenal ending. It would have been like one of the biggest cliffhangers in the history of TV. But they just ruined any bit of impact it could have. Instead of ending it there, which is the natural place to end it, we get this stupid 2 days later where we see all the characters are fine and dandy. They're reuniting. It's trying so hard to be overly sweet and sappy. And then at the end, it's like, oh yeah, remember those portals that opened? Well, here's it all. But by that point, the impact of the upside down portals being throughout the entire town is ruined. You killed all that momentum like that with the 2 days later. If you want the impact of that ending, have it right after Max dies, portals open. It's much better in every single way. It really is. It's just so frustrating that they didn't go that route. Have it so the heroes lost, make that as clear as day, the villain won, the world could end, and it sets the stage up perfectly for the final season. Instead of Max being the one who's stuck in Vecna's lair, have 11 be that person. That would be really phenomenal. But they don't. They just, despite the portal, they still try to paint it like it's a happy ending, and it just feels like we're going through the motions. The build-up was so good to this season, and the payoff was bad. And what, are we just going to get more of the same? It turns out Vecna's still alive, so what was really accomplished? If you want to go for the happy ending, go for the happy ending. I think it's stupid, I think it's lazy, but at least go for it. If you want to go for the sweat is still out there ending, then dedicate to that. But they just choose this medium where you don't get the best of either world, and there's just so much of this season that feels irrelevant now. So the portal opened, Vecna's still out there, maybe a bit weakened. The entire season was building up to them trying to kill Vecna, and they trying to make it seem like they succeeded, but surprise, no they didn't, they failed. and now we just gotta do it all over again. It kind of kills some of my excitement for season 5. I do like the Russian plot and how they attempt to tie it into the main plot, and I understand that when Hopper is finding the creature, it does cut to Vecna, and we see that he is getting damaged as a result. I just don't think they lean into that enough, and I just don't think it had to tie in. Just have them realize that the monsters could escape the prison and attack a village of people, and that they have to go back and kill it. And that's all the explanation you needed. It didn't have to tie into the main story. And like I said earlier, I was totally okay with them tying this season back to the events before the first season. I think it's cohesive enough, it makes enough sense. But I don't like anything that they did with the Upside Down. I think it was infinitely more interesting when it was just an alternate dimension of our world. But when Vecna enters it, it's completely empty, and he ends up creating Hawkins. Why exactly? And it's stuck in time. Why? And things that are in the real world come through in the Upside Down, but where's the consistency on that? It's just all very hit or miss, and I think it would just be way more interesting if it was just a creepier, grosser, slimier version of our world. That to me is much more interesting than he created Hawkins for unknown reason. And then I also wasn't quite sure what he meant when he said he teamed up with the Mind Flayer. So does he control it? Does it control him? And then how does that connect to the other 2 seasons that the Mind Flayer was in? I don't think we needed that. Like, they kind of turned him into Blowfield and Spectre, and I always hated the fact that in that movie, they're like, oh, I'm the mastermind behind everything, and they kind of do that here, and I just think it was so unneeded, and it just messes up all the interesting lore that this series already had. And then we also got this fight between Eleven and Vecna, which I found to be completely underwhelming. Like, 11 comes in and saves the day, and then Vecna gets up, he throws her over to the side, and then they fight for like 5 more seconds, and then that's it. 11's beaten. She's been getting her powers back all season, so she would be the most powerful version of herself, and she gets beaten like that. And then Mike's like, I love you, and then she's like, oh, I'm super powerful again now, and then Vecna gets defeated like that. It's just so unsatisfying. Like, you've got the budget, go all out here. I think it would have been a great moment if this is the first time we see 11 fly and they just go charging at each other. Actually make an epic fight, because the fight we got, for all that build-up, I just found to be beyond underwhelming. And then Vecna gets killed by 2 Molotov cocktails in a few rounds of a shotgun. Like, really? Like, this super powerful, menacing guy gets taken out like that? Like, does he not have his telekinetic powers in the real world? Because they made it clear this season that he does. So, why doesn't he just throw Nancy and Steve and Robin away? Why does he just take the bullets in the fire? Like, maybe 11 took his powers? You know, that's probably it. But, I don't know, just none of that works for me. I just found it that it became a complete mess. And like I said, we got the whole speech from Mike to 11 about how much he loves her. I found that speech to be very bad. This climax overuses the love makes you more powerful. We already saw it this season, and it gets done in a less effective way here. There's an eventual point in this final episode where I'm like, okay, there's far too many flashbacks. They're going for the same ideas already. Like, everything about this final confrontation, I feel like Dear Billy already did infinitely times better. And one other thing that really bothered me about this last episode is that the stakes are high, there's some tension, and Steve, Nancy, and Robin are about to kill Vecna, but we can't quite have that happen, so they step on a vine, and then the vines grab onto them and start choking them, and I'm just like, how are they going to get out of this? Well, you better wait 40 minutes to find out because, like, that's how long it is before we see them again. And then they just fall to the ground like everything's okay. Like, did the vine stop choking them? Like, why were they not killed in that instant? And the fact that we don't see them for as long as we don't see them fall just kind of makes you forget about them. So I know it's such a small thing, but it really bothered me. And man, this season just really frustrates me. Like I said about season 3 of Stranger Things, that it starts off very bad, but then it gets better as it progresses. And it left me with a good taste in my mouth because of how strong the ending is. While this season is quite the opposite. The first 8 episodes are absolutely phenomenal, but the last episode I found to be lacking in almost every single way, and it just left a bad taste in my mouth of this season. Like, it's better to start weak and get better than to start strong and get worse. Like, those first 8 episodes are phenomenal. It was building up to what could have been one of the greatest seasons of television ever. It's tense, there's high stakes, it's emotional, it's unique, it's ambitious, it's epic, it's everything you want a show like this to be. And it just goes out with a whimper, and it just really frustrates me. Like, I still think the cast all does an amazing job. I still think it's very well directed. Dear Billy is still a phenomenal episode. But the way it just ended, it really let me down. It kind of makes me feel like we're back at square one, where it just lost all that momentum. It kind of makes this season feel repetitive of every other. It kind of confuses all the lore behind the Upside Down in very unsatisfying ways. It doesn't commit to killing off any major characters. And it's just an ending that just... like, it is the most disappointment I've been with any bit of visual storytelling this last episode, because I want to be here and be like, it was incredible. I absolutely loved this entire season. The Duffer Brothers are on a level that no one else is at. And the ending, oh my goodness, what a cliffhanger. It's something even bigger than the ending of Infinity War. And you can see that. It's right there. And the show just missed in its finale. And unfortunately, it does let the season down overall. Still a really good season. I absolutely recommend it. I still really, really liked it. But I can't go as positive as I wanted to go on it. So I'm going to go ahead and give Stranger Things Season 4 a 7.5 out of 10. So apparently Season 5 will be the last season of this show. And all I can say is I hope it ends on a high note. I really hope that they nail the last season, because I still really like this show. It just keeps being shy of great, and it can really frustrate me. But look, so much of this season is really freaking good. Like, I had a smile on my face. I was emotional. It's everything that you hope to gain from watching a show, and just so frustrating. Anyways, did you see Stranger Things Season 4? What did you think about it? Let me know in the comments down below. Make sure you like, make sure you comment, make sure you subscribe. Stay tuned for some more videos soon, and Gavin